Girish is the chief architect at Flowsum, and he will be presenting how to evaluate DevOps solutions. Thanks for being here, Girish.
Thanks, Harika. So first, I wanted to credentialize, on that we have worked with, thousands of Salesforce customers, helping them with DevOps solutions, and we have worked with so many customers in helping them evaluate various solutions. And I have personally worked with over a few hundred customers in helping them implement DevOps solutions. So the purpose of this presentation is to share our findings, what we see, and how we can help customers evaluate DevOps solutions. So with that, I'm going to get into the content. So effectively, we have three large pieces. First is, what is it that the customer should look for when they're evaluating a DevOps solution? So what is the feature functionality they should look for? What are the problems it should solve? Common things, recurring patterns that we hear from customers on what are the key challenges in Salesforce DevOps. As we know, Salesforce is a very unique platform. We cannot take tools, from other platforms and repurpose them on the Salesforce platform. So we'll talk about what are the specific nuances in the Salesforce ecosystem. What should be the process for evaluation? So what can you do, and what are the different phases that you can use, and what you should do at each and every phase during the evaluation process. So with that, let's get into what are the various phases for evaluation. So the first thing that we see is many customers, when we speak to, is they say, that they are looking at 8 different vendors in while they're evaluating the Salesforce DevOps vendor. So what we recommend is to quickly eliminate some of the vendors, and rather than looking at all the 8 vendors, because it just takes a lot of time in selecting the right solution provider. So a quick way to quickly eliminate some of the vendors is to, first of all, look at how many reviews they have, on AppExchange, how many reviews they have on G2 Crowd, stuff like that. You can quickly look at that and see the rating of that specific vendor. The other thing that you can do is, because Salesforce is unique, I would say, what is the alignment with the Salesforce platform? What is the innovation they have done? If they have not done a lot of innovation, and they're particularly just using open source and standard version control system and scripts for DevOps, could you have a lot more innovation? Because Salesforce is unique. What are they doing to handle the various nuances? Like the previous question that Erica asked as part of the poll was, what is the key challenges you're having in deploying various component types? And about 60% of you said that you're having challenges in deploying profiles and permission sets. That's one of the things you should look for as, how is the vendor addressing that specific area? The other thing that you could look at is, where is the revenue for this particular vendor coming from, right? So let's say if you have someone where, out of $100 million, $99 million is coming from implementing projects, and only a small portion is coming from, from the DevOps solution, would they be the best for providing the DevOps solution, right? So that will very quickly tell you on who the right vendor is. So that will help you eliminate some of the vendors very quickly. The next thing is to look at just your own internal objectives. What is your own criteria? What is it that you want to accomplish, and by what time frame you want to accomplish? So for example, if you want to use Salesforce DX, when do you want to start using Salesforce DX? If you want to use regression testing, by what time frame do you want to use regression testing? Because what we see is, if we look at the maturity curve of most customers, they're typically using, it's a very strong pattern that we see across all the customers, that they use certain portions of the solution later, or they use, like for regression testing, most customers, they start doing it later. And then, earlier they want to focus on deployments, they want to focus on code merges, and they want to improve the speed for deployments. So that will help in creating your own plan for what are the objectives you want to accomplish. The third thing that we see is, this is something that we see almost in all sales cycles, is that when we work with customers, is not having a complete cross-functional team to help you evaluate the right solution. So for example, if you have admins and developers and release managers, we would recommend that you should have representation from each of those various roles who will help you choose the right solution, because each of them comes from a unique angle, and having all of them in all the meetings and being present and picking the right solution will greatly help. In addition to that, what we see is one of the key things is, the security team is typically not included. So that is typically an afterthought. And we see that this is typically not the best approach, because we work with many customers, and literally this has happened with so many customers. For example, we worked with Visa, and they spent 4 months in looking at all the solutions, and then the security team came, and because of the other solutions being not secure, they were very quickly eliminated. So if they would have included security in the first conversation, they would have just saved themselves 4 months in the whole evaluation process. The other aspect is to include a compliance officer as well. So what we are seeing is DevOps is also being used for compliance, where customers have to report on what is the risk of doing deployments and what is the risk in change management with the Salesforce ecosystem. And they have to produce compliance reports right from DevOps solutions and solutions like Flowsum. So having that compliance officers and having the requirements upfront would be greatly useful in helping you evaluate the solutions. The other aspect is, having understanding what is a timeline for implementation and what is the progress for implementation. So you could have your internal project plan that you at least want to get started by this time frame, and you want to accomplish the following objectives, and have the vendor, help you with those aspects. I would also say, from a technology perspective, you should think about what are the high-level options that you want to go with. For example, do you want to use Salesforce DX? If you want to use Salesforce DX, have you spoken to other customers who have adopted Salesforce DX? So we recommend talking to customers who have in the same size, have the same complexity of their Salesforce implementation, and so that you can use those particular technology options. And again, going back again to the vendor is, again, Salesforce is very unique. It's very different. There can be a lot of optimization done from a tooling perspective in helping developers and admins reduce the time for deployments and doing the release management process. We want developers and admins to be building new features rather than spending time in moving the changes across. So there's a lot of innovation that could be done as part of the solution. This is something that you should look at. How much has a vendor already innovated? How is the solution unique? Because Salesforce platform itself is unique. And then what is, depending on your team, you may want 24/7 support. How is this vendor supporting you? What is your response rate, across the globe? Because you may have a portion of the team which is offshore, and you may also want to provide them first-class support to those different developers and admins. So now what we will do is we'll talk about what happens during the evaluation phase. So one of the things that we see is, a lot of customers, they get attracted and mesmerized by seeing a lot of fancy slides, versus what we would recommend is that you should look at the various features, and you should look at what are the features, how those features will help you solve the problems that you're having. So you already have a good set of problems that you want to solve, and you should look at in the demo which features will solve which problems in a certain way. You should also focus on the outcomes. So for example, if you want to improve your delivery velocity, if you want to improve your quality of deliveries, how will the solution ensure that your quality of releases are better? So I would focus on exactly seeing on how the solution will help you meet the objectives that you're looking for. After the demo, so there's only so much you can do in a demo. Most customers, have only an hour for the demo. If you like the solution, we would recommend to have another session with the vendor and to see each of the transaction in live. So you can set up ask the vendor to say, show us the entire end-to-end setup, show us the complete end-to-end flow, right from pulling the changes from the development sandboxes, associating those changes with a user story, merging the changes between different developers, and then doing the code review process, and then delivering them into higher orgs. So this is something that we would highly recommend, and not to skip this step. Just doing the first level demo and just looking at the slides is typically not enough to make the right decision. During this phase, I would say you should measure on how long did it take actually to make the changes. How much of visibility did you actually get? Or was it a black box for you behind the scenes? So if you can have complete end-to-end visibility, if you can see all the transactions live and that meets your requirements, then this is a good solution to proceed forward and further evaluate the solution. So when we talk to customers, many of the customers are actually not very clear on what are the objectives that the solution should help them accomplish. So these are some of the high-level, common, unique challenges that we hear from customers. Is they want to keep the orgs in sync. So when you speak to most customers, they say they are looking for a CI/CD solution or a DevOps solution. But when we peel the onion, these are the things they come up. So the solution should definitely help you keep the orgs in sync with very little to no effort. So for example, if you're back promoting the changes in your development sandboxes, this should not be a half an hour long process. This should be a quick one-click process where with one single click, you can back promote the changes. Doing the code review process. So this is some of the things that we are seeing within our customer base is that most of our customers, they want to instrument code review as part of the process, and having a good code review process will ensure that the quality of releases are better, and you don't have to do so many rollbacks. So you can catch all the errors upfront. You can analyze all the dependencies. You can ensure there will be no code overrides. All the issues are caught upfront before you even attempt to deploy the changes. Doing seeding within your sandboxes, right? This is very crucial capability because full sandboxes, partial sandboxes are very expensive. So having this capability is very important. The other thing that we often see that customers don't ask us is having a good set of admin tools. So it's, for DevOps, it's good to have version control and pipelines and all that stuff. It's great, but we feel Salesforce platform is very different. So you need to have a lot of admin tools. For example, you need to be able to compare profiles and permission sets. So these admin tools will help you compare, all the different metadata types, and you must have a lot of other tools to do easier user management and other things as part of the solution. We would recommend to have some sort of a matrix like this. So this is an example matrix that we just put together. So I would put together the list of challenges that you're having, the list of capabilities that are by the vendor, and then what results you would get. So for example, let's say we are talking about back promoting the changes. How long does it take you to back promote the changes? If you're talking about override code, what are the features that the solution introduces, and what is the result you would get as part of the process? So I'm not going to go through each of them, but this is something that the solution could do for you. This is what I would put together. In terms of security evaluation, this is something that we see that most customers often skip or they don't ask for. So I was an ex-Salesforce employee, and I used to see customers who would spend 6 to 8 months in evaluating the Salesforce platform from a risk perspective. I know certain defense organizations, they have taken more than a year to test the Salesforce platform from a security perspective. But when it comes to doing evaluation for a DevOps solution, we see that many customers skip the step, even though it deals with the same data that your Salesforce platform is dealing with. So a key question that I would ask is, will the vendor have backdoor access to your data in the production org, right? What we find, the irony is customers are using products like Salesforce Shield to protect the data from internal employees, but they using the DevOps solution, they are giving actually access of the entire data set to the DevOps vendor. The other question I would ask is, will the vendor move your business data from their production org into the vendor's infrastructure? So this is where the customer will lose control of the data. And if they are doing that, then depending on your organization, this may be a complete no-no. The other aspect is that we see is not related to so much security, but I think it's more compliance focused. So although the underlying platform may be compliant, the question is the vendor compliant with that particular platform? So for example, let's say if I'm an organization which needs HIPAA compliance or PCI compliance, if I'm building my application, so if you look at the Heroku platform, the Heroku platform is compliant from HIPAA and PCI compliance. But if I build an app, by default, it is not compliant unless I go through the certification process. So that's another thing you could look for. And then the final thing is I would look for what are your data residency requirements. We have certain customers, certain countries which enforce, like Canada, Germany, they require that the data should not leave the country, especially if you're storing consumer data within your Salesforce instance. So this is very important to ensure that the vendor will not move your data to a different country, or it does not even leave Salesforce instance. We have certain customers who have to ensure the data is within the Salesforce instance and doesn't leave Salesforce at all. I would look at certain metrics during the evaluation process. So one of the things you should look at is potentially you could do this with all the solutions you're thinking about is you can benchmark the performance of the various solutions that you're using. So let's say if you're using, Bitbucket and Jenkins, take certain complicated use cases and, for example, do the benchmark performance with the Flowsum solution and see which solution will help you meet the goals faster. You'll have less headache, and developers will be much more productive. So we recommend doing certain benchmark as part of your evaluation process. I would look at what is the time to train an employee. So one of the things we hear from Salesforce at every conference is they want to make every business user into an application developer. That may be a stretch, but we often see in the Salesforce world a lot of citizen developers and a lot of business users, they make changes to the Salesforce platform and they want to promote the changes. So if you want to democratize your application development and enable more business users to make changes to your Salesforce platform, would be a very important criteria. And then other thing you would look at, what is the quality of your releases? What is your delivery velocity? There are 5 things that we see constantly that happen during the evaluation process. So I wanted to come up with 5 typical things that could be improved on during the evaluation process. The first is you could get attracted by a vendor's marketing. You could get attracted by vendors marketing, but I would rather focus on how much innovation they have done and what is the success they have delivered to the customer. So what is the retention rate? Do the customers keep using the solution year after year? You would see a lot of solutions. They are essentially a layer on top of typical version control systems and other solutions. But if there's not much innovation done, then that is where I would look for the vendor to improve on. The other thing is we see a lot of customers, they make the decision on the first demo. So I would recommend them to do a further due diligence to make sure that the vendor has the completeness of functionality. It can meet the matrix and meet the objectives that you're looking for. The other thing is before we talk to the vendor, I would focus on and listing the various outcomes that you want to accomplish as part of the solution. So, having the end in mind, it's always a great thing before you figure out on what technology you're going to use or how you're going to get there. The other thing that we see is, is when we ask customers, how will you benchmark the performance or how will you rate the performance of Flowsum with other solutions? Mostly we don't get that good response rate from customers. So if we know that information, we can help you in comparing the benchmark of Flowsum with other solutions in the space. And finally is skipping rigorous security evaluation. So this is something I would encourage to involve your security team early in the process so that you are, you are focusing on ensuring that the solution is very secure. The other thing I would not do is just focus on like compliance certifications, like having SOC 2 and having data center certifications, but really ensuring that the architecture of the solution will ensure that the solution is safe and secure. And that's all I had, Erica.
Thank you, Girish, for such an informative presentation. We do have some time for questions, so everyone please feel free to send those in. The first one I'm seeing, Girish, is do you recommend Git as a version control system for Salesforce?
Yeah, so it depends on you. It depends on a lot of different situations. So if you're an ISV vendor like us, where you have a lot of technical expertise in-house, you can definitely use Git. However, what we see is Git and Salesforce are not a match made in heaven for a lot of different reasons. So for example, we feel some of the admins and business developers, they don't know how to use Git. So that is why we have created a native version control system, which is completely built on the Salesforce platform, which can perform all the functions of Git without having to use Git. So you can either use a native version control system with the Flowsum solution, or you can integrate our native version control system with the Git version control system. So we have done a lot of innovation where we have focused on ensuring there are no code overrides and your application delivery velocity is high. And we can do this because of the new innovation we have done within the solution.
Great, and can Flowsum connect with Jira?
Yes, so Flowsum has a lot of integrations. We can integrate with all the solutions that you may already have in-house. So we can integrate with all the flavors of Git, like Bitbucket, GitHub, Azure DevOps, AWS Code Commit, or we can integrate with Jira, ServiceNow. We have a lot of different integrations out of the box.
And should Salesforce admins be part of the release management process followed by developers?
Yeah, so we would recommend, the way we have built the Flowsum solution is to empower all the various users, so whether that's developers or admins or release managers. So the solution will empower all the various roles and personas within your organization. However, it's up to the organization to determine on how those roles should be structured within the organization. So for example, when we work with banks, they have to implement segregation of duties, and they have to ensure that the developers are not testing and the people who are testing, they're not deploying into production. So with Flowsum, you can have those thick walls between the different personas, but out of the product, you can do all the various functionality.
Excellent. So we will go ahead and end questions here. Girish, did you have anything else for us today?
No, that's about it.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have a few more questions coming in. Okay. So does managing Flowsum require a dedicated head, or can it be managed by a developer?
You don't need someone dedicated. So the entire solution runs on Salesforce platform. There is zero to very minimal overhead in terms of running the Flowsum solution. You don't need anyone dedicated to maintaining the Flowsum solution.
Wonderful. Okay, so we will end the questions here. I know we want a little more time for our next poll question. So Girish, I just want to thank you again for such an excellent presentation and being with us here today.
Thank you.